and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program. When artist Connie Thibaut's partner, Bill Noble, died in 2018 after a long illness, she created a series of portraits that represent his struggle with a fatal disease during the last months of his life when he was in hospice. Connie based these portraits on the many hundreds of photographs she took of Bill with her cell phone and digital camera. In describing her work, Connie notes, "I have been through a profound experience as a witness to my partner Bill's illness and death, and these artworks are my visual testimony. At the hospital, where Bill spent the last months of his life, a great drama unfolded. I attempted to catch fleeting images of it with my camera." She continues, "Bill died with tremendous gravitas, seeming to transcend the condition of a helpless victim of a dread and fatal disease. It was as if I, in witnessing this event, as a mere conduit, a mere medium, were transported to another and a greater, though mysterious, dimension of existence. It was a humbling experience. I wondered at how it could be at once so sorrowful and at the same time so beautiful." This exhibit complements Connie's recent donation of Bill Noble's papers to the library's archives and special collections. Noble was a staunch advocate for rent control and worked tirelessly on behalf of Cambridge tenants in the 1970s and 1980s. He was a founding member of the Cambridge Tenants Union and its predecessor, the Cambridge Rent Control Coalition, and was an active opponent of the expansion of Harvard, MIT, and other large Cambridge institutions into city neighborhoods. Connie's tribute to Bill in this exhibit shows a deeply personal side of such a public figure so well known in the Cambridge activist circles. Both Bill's papers and some of Connie's photographs for Hierosgamos. Connie and I have been going over the pronunciation for days. It's the first time I've ever said the word. So Bill's papers and some of Connie's photographs are now available at the library's archives and special collections. Bill's collection, which features his lawsuit against MIT, can now be studied by researchers and will be preserved in perpetuity. So thank you, Connie. It's really wonderful. So tonight's program will consist of an artist talk by Connie, followed by a Q&A, and then we will go out to the gallery and take a look at the portraits, and we can talk more with Connie about her process and answer any questions for you. But before I hand everything over to Connie, I'd like to introduce her briefly. Connie Thibaut is a graphics and mixed media artist who studied painting for 5 years at L'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, where she was exposed to the surrealist painters whose work became a strong inspiration. Later, at the Massachusetts College of Art, where she graduated with a BFA and a Master's of Science in Art Education, she learned about the surrealist women painters and created a surrealist reinterpretation of an old French romance for her thesis show. She has studied with and has been influenced by Boston area artists such as the late Conver Metcalf and more recently, Adria Arch. And although she has retired from teaching, she continues to create art that is informed by her life experiences and which reinterprets the traditions of the Renaissance, fantastic art, and expression.
Good evening. My name is Connie Thibaut, and I am the author of this exhibition of drawings, Hierosgamos. But before I begin this talk, I would like to thank, at the same time, 4 people without whom this exhibit would not be possible, only 3 of whom are present. They are Alyssa Basie, the archivist of the Cambridge Public Library, Adria Arch, artist and colleague, and my friend Anita Semberlich, all of whom encouraged me to create this artwork and to show it. The 4th person who is not present at this time is my late partner, Bill, the love of my life, my muse, and the subject of this exhibit of portraits. Like Alyssa, Adria, and Nita, Bill also encouraged me to create my artwork and to show it. I entreat you all to bear with me as I speak for roughly, it may be 30 minutes. Afterwards, there will be a time for Q&A if you're interested. This is a prepared speech, so bear with me. Hierosgamos, from Requiem to Revival, is based upon two of my exhibition series. They are Requiem for Bill and I Thou, both of which I am currently showing separately on my website. The two series were created, for the most part, consecutively between 2020 and 2023. Hierosgamos was the name in ancient Greece for a sacred union or marriage, as it was practiced in the mystery nature religions. In the context of this show, I intend Bill and I to represent the sacred union, lost and regained. Bill, the love of my life, died in 2018 after a long illness. And you may have heard these words from Alyssa because they are on my website, but I need to read them again to you. So I created these portraits in his honor. I think of them as visual poems, sonnets to the one I love, dedicated to Bill, my friend, my lover, my child, my brother, my parent, my all. They represent Bill's struggle with his fatal illness during the last months of his life when he was in hospice. I have been through a profound experience as a witness to my partner Bill's illness and death, and these artworks are my visual testimony. I dedicate these artworks to all those who have been wounded by the death of someone they love, putting them at odds with the cruelty of the human condition. For those here tonight who are not necessarily familiar with Bill's contributions to Cambridge politics and society in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, Bill was a tenant and community activist, a citizen hero, known and admired for his intelligence, integrity, and courage. But the portrait drawings of Bill that I present to you do not reflect Bill's public personhood. They represent instead Bill's private personhood after he was stricken with an Alzheimer's-related illness. As Bill was heroic as a community activist when he was physically healthy, so Bill was heroic later in his life when he was contending with a fatal and incurable disease and was confronting death. And it was beautiful. This is what inspired me, and this is what I hoped to convey, its awesomeness, its grandeur. As you have heard, at the hospital where Bill spent the last months of his life, a great drama unfolded. I attempted to catch fleeting images of it with my camera. Bill died with tremendous gravitas, seeming to transcend the condition of a helpless victim of a dread and fatal disease. Witnessing this event, I felt transported to a greater, mysterious dimension of existence. It was a humbling experience. I wondered at how it could be at once so sorrowful and at the same time so beautiful. During this time, I took hundreds of photos of Bill on my cell phone and with my digital camera, planning to create 2D artworks derived from them in the future. It was with this intention that I had many of the digital JPEGs reproduced into photographs, usually 4x6. And it was from these photos that I worked freehand to create these drawings. The drawings were not created on site. The final drawings were often inspired by a patchwork of the photos, the face often lit from different directions, and the hands accompanying the portrait were often taken from entirely different photos. Despite my reference to the photos, realism, especially photorealism, has never been my goal at all. In this case, the photos were a means to another end and not an end in themselves. My goal was to attempt to express and render in visual lines and tones my appreciation of Bill's spiritual struggle as I perceived and witnessed it. Black, white, and gray tones seemed to me appropriate to the mood. I discovered that if I worked with my left hand, my non-dominant hand, I was able to create more expressive, gestural drawings with far greater spontaneity. And further, I found that sketch marks made with a graphite or charcoal pencil were the best way to capture the fleetingness of life. This was a real departure because while my training and preparation in drawing had been classical and I had taught traditional drawing and painting, I found that after Bill's death, that approach was no longer relevant. Suddenly, the expressionist movement, particularly in the graphic arts, printmaking and so on, became a vital source of inspiration. I felt as if I'd been summoned by an intangible force outside of my control that compelled me forward to create these drawings. In the beginning of this project, I had the distinct impression upon completing a drawing that someone else had drawn it, not me, but someone else. I felt as if I were a mere conduit, a mere medium, catapulted forward by this summons, by this unknown force. Something happened to me that had nothing to do with my will. At first it only jostled me, but gradually it thrust itself upon me, shocking me with the sensation of an earthquake. Some people receive the summons and they don't respond, or rather, they don't recognize the summons and ignore it. There was no ignoring the summons. The result is this exhibition. Every aspect and detail about this exhibit reflects the audacious influence of this strange, as it were, behind-the-scenes presence. Baffled by the cruelty of Bill's fate and seeking consolation, I have looked for answers in philosophy. The existential psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described 3 ways to find meaning in life. The first way is to create or to act directly, such as to be an activist or to create an artwork. The second way is to experience and to be receptive to something that happens to you, such as to fall in love, for example. The third way is to assume an heroic attitude toward what Frankl called, quote, a fated condition or unavoidable suffering. And this, according to Frankl, is the highest way to give meaning to one's life. I can attest to Bill's assumption of this very courageous attitude towards his illness, fated because it was untreatable, incurable, and life-threatening. This exhibit is about what happened intensely to Bill and simultaneously, as I accompanied him on his journey, what happened intensely to me and how it transformed us. I will never ever be the same, and I will never see or experience the world around us in the same way. Alzheimer's is a terrifying disease. I speak from my perspective as a witness and friend. For Bill, it must have been so much more frightening. I remember Bill saying to me, "Oh, Connie, this is my worst nightmare." Bill was sometimes delirious and was convinced we were trapped in a war zone of bombs and explosions. "Just pack up a few things in a bag, Connie," he said to me, "and we'll leave as soon as possible." Bill sensed a great urgency to escape wherever we were, to find a way back to our home from where, according to him, we were exiled. That lost home was Cambridge, from where we had moved to Arlington in 1997 after the traumatic prohibition of rent control. Bill asked me repeatedly to cross over to Cambridge with him, to the other side, where our hearts are. For us, it was like wartime. I compare Bill's situation with the predicament of the prisoners Viktor Frankl told about in Man's Search for Meaning, who were trapped in the World War II concentration camps and found themselves unable to escape. While Bill, while he was conscious and aware, was trapped inside by his disabling physical illness and, as he expressed to me, was less and less able to communicate, reach out as he might. For example, when I was feeding Bill with a spoon at the hospital, Bill cried out to me, "Why can you do that, but I can't?" And within a month of his death, Bill explained, "I feel like I need to change my body." So I think of Bill metaphorically as a prisoner of war, consigned to solitary, or as a fallen soldier on the battlefield of life. As adverse circumstances had brought us together when we lived in Cambridge and fought together for tenants' rights, So the adverse circumstances of Bill's illness brought us together and reinforced our relationship. Adversity brought us together, and then when Bill died, it tore our unity apart. How do you talk about a wound? Because that's what it's about, a wound that will not stop aching and which demands attention, a severing of the self, the ripping apart of the fabric of the psyche that changes one forever, that separates one from the satisfactions of the mundane, making them impossible, and hurtles one into a new duality, that alters the sense of reality from agreement with time and anything and everything that can be measured, to revolt, to refusal, to an alternative sense of rightness outside of the schedule, to madness and sincerity, to the Dionysian, to agreement with, solidarity with Bill's madness, to a folie à deux. People with dementia often can't write checks or be here on time, but they have not always lost contact with what is deepest in themselves, with their own souls, as we in our mechanically ordered society have been conditioned to do, complying with the betrayal of our deepest selves. Another existentialist, Martin Buber, referred to a psychological state he called the turning. And maybe this is what he meant, turning away from the utilitarian to the sacred. To find a new unity from the torn self, this is the imperative. The disappointment in reality opens a fissure into an alternative point of view. The tear is like a crack, and once one falls through, one realizes how much of our conventional perception is superficial. I learned a lot about love from Bill, and after he became disabled, even more. Paradoxically, the disease seemed to open up other portals of relating to the world. If he were to return to this world, I am persuaded he would want to bring with him everything we had gained from this terrifying experience, all the benefits, the gifts we received. Since Bill became sick, it was my experience that he dropped his former reserved character, revealing a more vulnerable person. He became instead very demonstrative and communicated openly in very expressive and spontaneous ways. Bill had always been great company, but ironically, he became even better company after he was considered to be impaired. And much better company than many people who pride themselves on their usefulness to society. I remember our idyllic walks through the forest of Menominee Rocks Park, and Bill's childlike wonder at the natural changes of the seasons, the stars and the moon, the setting and rising of the sun. I have referred to Bill's attitude in this phase of his life as the defiant affirmation. In other words, the courage to be affirmative in the face of his fatal illness. I can testify that he never ever lost his humor, his sense of irony, and above all, his humanity and personhood. Until the day he died, he was keenly aware of me and my presence, and he addressed me until almost the last day. He was present as a poet is present. He spoke in poetic metaphor, and he never lost his ability to express love. I have come to recognize that grief is impossible without love, but in our competitive dog-eat-dog world, love is trivialized and not taken seriously. It is dismissed as unimportant, an embarrassment, even a weakness. Accordingly, it might be argued that I should just move on. Move on to what and for what? As Bill yelled at me several days before he died, wait, I want to give you a diamond. Ironically, in my experience, love and friendship represent the most valuable experience one can have in contrast to the absurdity of many of the activities to which we are expected to devote our energies. We have created a society that works better for an Excel spreadsheet than for a living. Why is it important to tell about love, loss, and grief? Because it throws into relief what really matters. I've noticed that there is frequently an inverse relationship between integrity and success in our culture. And since no matter how it is achieved, success alone is valued, integrity often falls by the wayside neglected as irrelevant. The symbolism and composition of my artworks was not deliberately planned. Rather, they occurred to me involuntarily, unconsciously. They came to my mind seemingly of themselves, and I noticed their intellectual significance with surprise only later. Bill's illness seemed to have created the effect of an altered state of consciousness, allowing the subliminal to break through. I feel as if I shared and participated in the madness sympathetically. We shared our adversity. As I write this, it is unclear if I'm talking about him or me, whether I mean the wound from our separation or the assault he sustained from the illness or how it afflicted me. After I saw Bill lying in his hospital bed, looking upwards in profile, engaged in an animated discussion with someone I couldn't see, I was inspired to draw the petition, which I named after a poem by W.H. Auden. That poem begins, "Sir, no man's enemy, forgiving all." And I thought to myself that the presence had broken through for him as well, and I must have been witness to Bill conversing with a higher power. If you're skeptical, many of the philosophers I've consulted have acknowledged this presence and have spoken well of it. Martin Buber recounts from I Am Now, quote, "Man receives not a content, but a presence. A presence is strength." And Emerson wrote, quote, "We lie in the lap of immense intelligence. Its presence or absence is all we can confirm," end of quote. I imagine the mysterium tremendum as a manifestation of the presence, as a mysterious and powerful force of destiny. This is Bill and me confronting the mysterium tremendum, also known as magnum mysterium. But at any rate, black and white and gray are the neutral tones I chose intuitively to portray the mystery that I wish to pervade this drawing series. I chose to use graphite and charcoal as the best medium for this drawing project because they are the most basic tools of expression with which I wrote from a while ago, anticipating this show. I wrote to myself, this exhibit is a revolt. The human condition is not reasonable or rational. Our response to our fate must not be cold or objective. So imagine my delight to read recently from the French-Algerian author Albert Camus' essay, "Create Dangerously." Quote, "Art in a sense is a revolt against everything fleeting and unfinished in the world. Art is neither complete rejection nor complete acceptance of what is." Elsewhere in The Rebel, which is a whole book, Camus wrote, quote, "Artistic creation is a rejection of the world, but it rejects the world on account of what it lacks and in the name of what it sometimes is. To create beauty, the artist must simultaneously reject reality and exalt certain of its aspects. Art disputes reality, but it does not hide from it." End of quote. So if what Camus said about art is true, in my art, I have rejected Bill's helplessness in the face of an implacable disease, and I have rejected the absoluteness of Bill's death. Rising above his undeserved condition, Bill is prophet, metaphysician, philosopher, redeemer, and redeemed. His unjust fate reversed. He is a hero, and he always was, in spite of his injuries. The existential imperative was to live a passionately committed life on our own subjective terms, which we choose. And we choose the very personal way we respond to adversity. This is what I hear from the existentialists, from Sartre, of Viktor Frankl, Albert Camus, and even Martin Buber. This is what I heard from Bill also by the example of his life. In the concluding paragraphs of a letter to the Cambridge Chronicle from July 1991, Bill wrote, quote, "Finally, there is the matter of the tone of your story and of the assumptions which underlie it. I, along with many residents of Cambridgeport, Riverside, and Area 4, do not agree that University Park will be good for Cambridge and that clearing a site for the kind of megastructure commercial development planned by MIT and its agents constitutes progress. In our view, you have things exactly backward. Every day that passes shows the wisdom of the long struggle waged by neighborhood residents against overdevelopment and MIT overexpansion in Cambridgeport. That struggle goes on today, and MIT remains the obstacle to real progress. End of quote. Bill's life represents the challenge to live passionately, to find meaning in suffering, and to defy the cruelty of existence. It is the quintessential existential message. Conversely, most people in our society seem to consider their life to be a success if they've avoided adversity, suffering, or passion as much as possible. Everything conspires to anesthetize people in this culture against any genuine feeling. But if true love and a life of passionate commitment will open you to suffering, will it not open your life to meaning also? At his memorial service, I spoke of Bill's longing for justice. The sadness evident in Bill's face in many of my drawings, especially in The Wounded Warrior, is due to that longing for justice unfulfilled. Since my drawings illustrate Bill's struggle with the human condition, I allude here to metaphysical justice. Camus, in The Rebel, made the distinction between metaphysical rebellion and historical rebellion. And I'll just go off script here. What he meant was that metaphysical rebellion is just rebelling against the human condition that we all share. The cruelty of our fate is self-conscious, aware, intelligent, and self-aware people who are doomed to die. And historical rebellion, as you know, is very different. So I allude here to metaphysical justice. Camus in The Rebel made the distinction between metaphysical rebellion and historical rebellion. When my friend Nita asked, is it possible that we can't find justice except in the longing for it? Is it possible that justice is discovered in our longing for it, as Simone Weil said, that we know God through his absence? End of quote. Nita was appealing to an absence of metaphysical justice. On the other hand, the passage I just quoted from Bill was a cry for historical justice, from his personal point of view. Bill was a person of conscience and a rebel, but Bill's struggle for justice in the social realm represented a personal struggle as well as a universal struggle that unites us all. Bill's struggle against Alzheimer's was also a personal struggle as well as a universal struggle. His revolt, his struggles are ours. So I return to the passing of the torch from Bill to me in my drawing, to the torch we had shared. Bill died in 2018. The example of Bill's life challenges us to address those longings for justice, both general or metaphysical and personal or historical in our own lives. As one who loved Bill and witnessed his struggle, I passionately hope that Bill's example and his unfulfilled longing for justice will not be forgotten. With this exhibition, I pass the torch to the audience and to others. I pass on the challenge to live heroically and meaningful in individual ways, as Bill did. Questions? Adrian.
Connie, it has been my distinct pleasure to watch you, go through these 4 years together as you were creating these drawings. And, what a, an amazing journey you've taken us, all of us who've been on Art Chat, with you. it's been amazing, and
Well, it's been amazing for me to work with everyone.
amazing isn't even a good word for it. It doesn't seem deep enough. But anyway, thank you for sharing yourself with us, and thank you for also sort of paving the way for understanding that you've mourned and you've grieved and you have turned it into art making.
Ava, I couldn't hear the last thing you were saying.
Oh,
Somehow
you mourned and you grieved and you turned it into art. Yeah.
Is everybody here? Or should I pass around the microphone? Okay.
Someone else? Dan!
Oh, okay. I have a couple things. Well, what was the relationship and the painting with Pythagoras?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you asked that. The first reason was that I've always loved Pythagoras, however his name is pronounced, and I associate him with geometry, and math is not my strong point. Geometry, however, really intrigues me. I always associate him, and there are some mathematicians here, and they may cringe when I say this, but there's more than one mathematician. I am looking at two mathematicians right now. But I think that the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Anyway, I love that. When I was a teenager, and we were looking at that, but there's an. Am I way off? I see a nod. Oh, great, fantastic. Elizabeth, thank you. And Sharon. So, at any rate, so I have wonderful associations with that, and I love Bill, so he had to become Pythagoras. But there's another reason also. Apparently, the followers of Pythagoras had all kinds of, they engaged in magical thinking of all types. And they thought that everybody could hear the singing of the constellations, the stars. This was apparently their belief. They were convinced, but that we were so used to it that we couldn't hear it. And so, given that Bill loved the sky, and when we were inside, he would drag me to the window or drag me outside to show me a sunrise or sunset or show me the stars. I think of him in terms of Pythagoreans also for that reason.
I get it.
Peter.
Yes, I have a question about the influence of catholicism on you.
Oh, yeah, that's incredible. No, expressionism. Catholicovitz, or however you pronounce her name. No, she's my. She is the greatest influence on my work. Yes, the German pacifist artist during actually both World War I and World War II. Yeah, and no, she author of wonderful woodcuts and drawings and sculptures and so on. Yes, Peter, that's and also her support of socialism and worker struggles. Yes, she's a hero to me with the first rank. Thank you.
And your grief.
David.
See if we can hear it.
Speak loudly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. I also love Pythagoras, so I was happy to hear that.
Oh my God.
I was particularly interested to hear you say that you had done these with your non-dominant hand.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering, part of it is that just seems to get to the core of what you're trying to do with these paintings, which is to get beyond sort of the conscious control that you worked on forever and to get back to something really. And I'm wondering whether you've ever done that before, or if that's something that was new to this.
I had never done it before. I must say to you that I'm engaged in this artist support group led by the intrepid Adria Arch, and who was spoken earlier. And Adria actually suggested it to me. I'd never done it before in my life, and I was skeptical, but I fell in love with it. It's much harder for me to control my left hand, my non-dominant hand. It slows me down, but there's no two ways about it. I'm able to say what I mean to say, and without inhibitions. When I go back to using my right hand, I'm all like this, and oh my God, and becoming obsessive, and I can't work on the whole drawing at all. It seems it has an extraordinary effect, and I will never ever. But now, if I were to lose a hand, I would, or if I had to choose it, I'd lose my right hand. I'd say stick with my left. Yeah.
Is this working? Yeah. All right, I'm going to stand because I want to stand and as a tribute to your bravery, your courage, and your tenacity of carrying through on this task that you had, which is to try to bring some of the experience Bill and you and Bill and the rest of the world and so forth to us through your art and through your drawings and so forth. I think that's an extraordinary achievement. The second point is something that I don't know if it's quite the same drawing, one that's on our left, but I saw a drawing in there that was you and Bill and to the mystery.
Yes.
And you use the term mystery here.
Yes. These are just photographs
Right.
taken by actually they are enlarged by a friend of mine who couldn't be here tonight. He's a photographer, and I was introduced to him by Adria, Gary Doer, and so this is exactly the same drawing.
Is it? Okay, I'm so glad because I picked that on the wall of the panel, and I said this is the one that really draws me, which is the additional point that I'd like to make is as you look at this and other drawings, but this one struck me particularly, and you study it, and you spend time with it, so it draws you in to a world which is totally, outside. I mean, it's incredible, that ability to produce something that draws you into an experience. And it's really quite abstract. It's not, highly realistic, but it's the abstractness and, in some sense, the way in which it's portrayed. Somehow it appeals. You just say, oh, I love that. I have to get inside it. I have to understand it. I have to do something with it. I don't know if we ever can, but at least the fact that you do that is an incredible achievement. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Hello. I heard you talk about what it meant to, all right, let me start this a different way. You had this very personal experience. And then you used art as a way of expressing it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And I also heard you share Bill say to you, we'll meet again.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about, as an artist, with all of these different stages of process and exposure in this life and beyond, how do you manage
what I'm assuming is a responsibility that feels like an obligation. Like, how do you, in yourself, determine where, as an artist in a world that doesn't necessarily appreciate art, use art for yourself, for the world, and transcending beyond that?
You speak of responsibility and obligation. Well, after, I don't know if I'm really, well, I'll really be answering this bit, but what I think of when you first say that is that after Bill died, I was, it was a very painful period, a long period of intense pain. And I was fraught with many different obligations that, all kinds of obligations. And in worldly obligations. And finally, I felt over a period of years that, given my values, and that my greatest obligation was to Bill, because and to since I love him and for what he stood for, what I believe he stood for, which is very important, that I'm working with Alyssa on a building an archive of Bill's papers, which Alyssa alluded to, and it's it's a long process. I'm trying to read as much as I can of them. I mean, there are boxes and boxes and boxes before I get them up to Alyssa, and so I feel an obligation to pass on and to his legacy, his legacy and what he gave, through his writing. I don't know if that's answering your question at all. That's one obligation I feel and one responsibility I feel. But since my work has been visual art, really, from as far back as I can remember, to create this series of drawings was the beginning of answering that summons that I felt was that I heard, and I don't really understand it logically, but it's to try to convey visually, as we were talking earlier about working with your non-dominant hand in order to discover or express the buried self, what is perhaps the best part of us that is not conditioned. And so I feel that I have a responsibility there to continue to create. But when you're involved in the creative process of creating art, and I don't know if with literature is the same, but you often you're not thinking it out in terms of this is my responsibility or this is my obligation. It's a but you are, and you may be receive a push from this presence, something like that. But that's I don't know if I'm answering you.
Yes. In particular, I was talking about I was really moved by the summon. You were summoned to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I think is even more compelling
Yes, it is. Sorry to use this word, but it trumps them all. Yeah. But yeah, no, absolutely, the summons is confirmed. But his essays are full of that. And another essay, Spiritual Laws, you know. But you know, another thing about self-reliance is that apparently his idea of what the self was the soul. It wasn't, you know, our ego, but the soul. So no, I usually keep this a secret because, you know, I'm not interested in, you know. Well, it's you know, a very unconventional way of looking at things. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Sorry.
Oh, Jeff. Hi. Jeff Murray. Yeah. Hi.
Anyone else have any
Jérôme and Edith.
If not, we can head out to the gallery and everyone can get refreshments.
Could I just say one more thing? I probably don't need the mic. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I just not. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I've been moved to tears so many times. Looking at your beautiful work, and
Thank you.
but also, you know, your presentation and all that you've given us besides your artwork is like a whole course in the meaning of art, life, love, death, and rock and roll. Seriously, I mean, just wonderful. You were just brilliant, and you know, gave us so much to think about. Gave me so much to think about. And thank you.
Let's have something.
I just want to say thank you to my art teacher for over the last 20 years. This is great work. Thank you so much.